Good morning. It is Sunday, and with only a little bit over a week to go to the election. Um, the last video I made was basically, what we should do if the Democrats win. I am aware that most of the things that I've been for most of my life, if not all my life, um, on the on the scale of American politics, is quote unquote to the left, or far to the left. Mistake. Our political system is inadequate to govern this country. Um, First of all, just having two major parties is simply idiotic. Um, there are almost 340 million people here in the United States, and to lump all the ideas into just two parties, where, by the way, both parties do not adhere to those ideas, way that people within those parties don't agree with the ideas that are in within both parties. Um, Democratic Party is the umbrella is so large. Um, it includes people like me who grew up in the 60s and still to this day hasn't forgotten a thing about what happened then, the thing influenced us back then, and how it's more important than ever to push the things that were important then and those things that have since become important in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s, and going into the future of the 21st and 22nd centuries. And you put that with the ideas of centrists or corrupt, or I don't know what you call people like Manchin from West Virginia, where he's kind of like our Sue Collins, where he plays the political corrupt game of being able to vote Republican whenever he sees that he can afford to do so, and it keeps him in office. But it has nothing to do with the needs of this country or the needs of the people in West Virginia, who, by the way, we all know the people of West Virginia have an enormous amount of needs. Um, Now, he could say he cares about them. Is that how he votes, though? It's not how he votes. It's not how he votes on education. It's not how he votes on healthcare. It's not how he votes on anything. He's Sue Collins, the Sue Collins of the Democratic Party, where they just vote, uh, they play both sides, and it's irrelevant. And talking about Sue Collins, um, and the corruption of our political system, uh, we have the Supreme Court justice and that process going through the Senate. And this is where the legislative branch of the United States has to be looked at again from a constitutional perspective. The Senate, the Republican Senate, during the past number of years, has stacked the court. They have held up the process, a legitimate process under the last Democratic president, and they have reversed that process because shoe was on the other foot. So they are ramming in and stacking the court. Now, there is nothing in the Constitution that keeps the court at 9 members. And I would be, at first glance, I'm against stacking in sense where the Democrats would do as Franklin Roosevelt had tried to actually increase the number of seats. Look, I love the Constitution. I've read the Federalist Papers like 100 times, which may seem unbelievable because the book is this thick. But I've read every single one of Madison and Hamilton and John Jay's Federalist Papers at least 100 times each. I'm not an attorney, but I know those Federalist Papers as well as anybody living. And there isn't anywhere in the Constitution that limits the number of seats to 9. As a matter of fact, there were more or less seats prior to the Civil War of 9. There were more seats, and now I have to read the history of that more, but I am aware that there were a different number of seats on the Supreme Court, and I'm not sure exactly how few and how many, but there was a period of time in the early 1800s where the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, was a different amount of seats. There's nothing in the Constitution that limits it being only 5 seats or making it 25 seats. But if nothing else, there has to be term limits in the Supreme Court. This for life thing has run its course. Clearly corrupted. And to have such a hard process of removing them, which I'm not sure how many have ever been removed in the history of the court. I believe there was maybe 1 or 2, and that I will have to look into. But we will be discussing the Supreme Court no matter what, because it does look like the Republicans are going to be ramming probably one of the worst, and I mean one of the very worst candidates that I've ever seen in my lifetime. She's not one of the best. She's not very smart. She hasn't even really been, she's never been a prosecutor. And she's only been a judge for a few years, actually. So, sorry, I have allergies. I apologize. I'm not highly produced like a lot of other people. I have me, and that's it. So, anyway, so one of the things we must do is end this stream. Is to change the judicial branch into term limits. My brother and I discussed it and had an in-depth discussion about it. He had suggested 18 years, and I suggested 24 years. Now, that seems like a long time, and I do believe that having those longer terms would affect the court the least while still having them. And in my own belief, the way I see it, there should still be 9 justices. So the way to change it, the first 3, you have 3, 3, and 3. The first 3 are changed to term limits during the next political next presidential election. So it'd be 2024. The next three, 2028. The next three, 2032. So that it is staggered every 4 years. And that way, the court will have continuity. You don't rip away, the institutional memory, and but you do have a chance of changing the court on a regular basis. Now, if judges go to now, they may leave before the 24 years. That's fine. But once those 24 years are up, then I believe the Senate, if let's say all three don't leave, then the Senate has the duty, the constitutional responsibility of changing all three seats within a year. The president picking the candidates, maybe picking three candidates, or maybe picking 4 or 5. The Senate picking the three best and approving the three best. And that's the way I see it. That's a more, I believe, democratic process that we have now, where somebody who is so corrupt, where we have an incredibly stacked court now, where they're living in the 18th century, and the reality is that the rest of the world is 3 centuries ahead of them. We're going to be stuck with something like that unless for the rest of the 21st century, because these people are all young, and they're going to be living until the 2020, 2070s, 2060s, 2070s. You got to be kidding me that the last 2 and 3, 4 people that have been put on this court are going to live a long time and are going to keep this country as backwards as possible, as corrupt as possible, and owned by the corporations, and keeping us in war, and keeping immigrants out, and keeping white power in. And it's all the wrong things that we've all learned and gone through over 2.5 centuries. And to actually not change the system would be the most un-American thing. Changing the system is part of being American. Changing the Constitution and amending the Constitution is part of being American. Institutions were put together during the late 1700s per the Revolution, and that doesn't mean that those institutions cannot be updated. In the history of humanity, things didn't end in the 1780s. There is continual change and evolution in all things. So there's no justifying. You don't have to justify the change to the Constitution. The change in the Constitution would actually be this way of this. It's not even conservative. It's to actually support the fact that we're only going to look at it from an originalist's point of view. Oh, really? So only a few white guys vote? Only a few white guys can own land? What the hell are you talking about? We have a country where there's 500 different religions, and every single color in the spectrum. So what are you talking about? You want to go back to slavery? That's originalism. You want to go back to where women are slaves to their bodies and to men, and not being able to own land and all the other stuff? You want to go back to the caves? That's part of it. So that's not a. It's not a. That is not a conversation. Uh, the conversation is that humanity is in the 21st century now with 21st century problems, and we can't have a judicial system that is mired in 18th century corruption, which is where we are, and we are going to be embedded in for at least the next 15 years or so, unless something drastic happens. So, so what I do see is to solve this, not stacking the court immediately and not stacking, like let's put in 15 judges. No, I am willing, unfortunately, I'm willing to wait until 2024 to start changing the judiciary, the Supreme Court, and changing 3 judges at a time, 24, 28, 32 during the presidential elections. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, to keep it non-political and away from the federal elections, actually, it should be done in 22, 26, and 22, 26, and 30, so that these are the off years when presidents are not elected, and the Senate would be free to do its best to change the system and pick 3 new judges every um, every 4 years from 22 to 2030. That's the way I see it. I think it's fair. I think it's more than fair for both sides and all sides to put in 3, 3, and 3. And from that time forward, there are still 9 judges, but they can only serve 24 years. The reason why I came up with 24 years, it equals, to go back to the Constitution a little bit, it would equal 12 terms. It would equal 12 terms of a House of Representative. It would equal 6, 12, 18, 24, 4 terms of a senator. 4 terms. So even though it's not for life, 24 years is a long time. It is a generation. And that's about as long for anybody, good or bad, young or old, fat or skinny, doesn't matter what color or what religion. It is colorblind and all the other, it's not racist in any way. You're there for 24 years and you are gone. And somebody new comes in. That's life. And that's the way it should be. Not for life, but 24 years. It is a long time. It is more than fair. I don't think there's any real argument that can be made against it. It would make the judiciary more responsive to the reality, not so much to any uh, um, side or faction, as Madison and Hamilton put it, but to the reality of where humans are on this planet by using the law as we have it and addressing it in that way. I think that's fair. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that subject. I may or may not go back on again today. This is my second stream, and I might end it there. We'll see. Talk to you later. Thanks.